So let's see this. What day is it? Like the 30th or something? I've got time. I can do a video on my top and mid, maybe some of the stuff that the supports do. That's pretty relevant. I can go over each team or something like this. And good God, it's already November 2nd. Where exactly does the time go? I need to get some coffee. So yeah, sorry about how late this video is, but I do want to talk about what I thought was the most relevant thing in the semifinal and something that I think is going to be really important and could basically decide the entire grand final for either Fnatic or IG, and that had a lot to do with how both Ning and Rookie and Caps and Broxa were playing with pressure ganks, or level 2 ganks, or making sure they get scuttle control and taking over the map that way. So we're just gonna go over a couple of the games, and really explain why this was so relevant and why a lot of these games just felt like they were decided at level 2. Confession, I was going to include the Twitter video from Vigar V2 right here, where he goes over how it actually isn't better the jungler that wins, it's better laners who understand different power spikes and different junglers that win the match, but I got suspended from Twitter. Really nothing I can do about that. So we're just gonna get into the dry, boring me talking at you part. Okay, so let's just look at this complete and utter disaster waiting to happen. First of all, you have your Grasp Collie, which is really smart, into the Swain, but that is going to be your only lane of priority for G2 and is the only option that G2 really have with this draft to make anything happen. On the plus side, though, they definitely have the better jungle spike, the better level 2 jungle spike, which is something that I'm going to talk about here because they kind of just lucked into the Xin Zhao pick. They saved it until after second ban phase. Got it, whatever. We're not going to split hands. We're not going to talk about what needs to happen. We are going to talk about what needs to happen here, excuse me. First of all, let's see what needs to happen for Xin here because his windows are very small to make something happen or to have any kind of success. If he doesn't start blue, 9 times out of the 10, he's definitely going to lose it. So he's incentivized to start blue. However, because a lot of Xin's strengths are his level 2 gank patterns, and that is going to be extremely important in this game here, he most likely needs to start red buff. So what this means for him is that he's going to start red buff, and his option is to try to go bottom to blue and contest that, which he's going to lose basically every contest since he has 0 priority around level 2 against his bottom lane, especially if you assume that Ning is going to solo his red buff and be able to invade and influence this blue camp. So he's not going to do that, and that's what a lot of junglers just go do the red buff start into the Krugs. The problem with this is that you basically are incentivized to want to go mid level 2, so he should probably not do Krugs. He should probably just immediately transition into kind of a desperate mid gank because Jace is still vulnerable to this general 2-person setup, the Xin Zhao and the Aatrox, that should still win the 2v2 because, you know, Jarvan's just going to be super useless and he wants to basically be left alone. This electrocute Jarvan wants to be able to get some creep, scale up, and influence whatever side of the map that Xin Zhao is not on until his laners scale, especially if you consider how much more threat this Swain is going to have with his ability to snare out and push the wave really effectively. You can't really gank an Akali because she'll just enter Shroud and BG. Obviously, Wonder will get pushed anyway, so you doing a pressure gank on that side of the map isn't going to matter. So you're definitely going to be incentivized to want to make something happen in mid here and force some of the pushback off of Jace. And obviously, okay, this is the real big point. Obviously, you going mid at some point as Xin Zhao in this scenario isn't really going to give you priority, but it will create a window so that you can transition to the top side or to the bot side, and you can actually contest some of this shit that is usually impossible to contest because you're losing mid priority. And this is why the mid priority section is so super important. Because what you're playing for when you're doing these pressure ganks that we're going to talk about in this game and some of the other games, and when you're exerting the kind of pressure that Ning exerts, it's not about getting kills, it's not about doing anything, it's about gaining map control, it's about gaining small objectives that create a snowball opportunity. So let's go ahead and get started here. We have very standard starts from both junglers, putting down the trinket in the top bush. It's important to notice that when IG play, they are actually really happy with using level 1 trinkets early on in the game, and they're free to use these sweepers because what they want is they want the early level 1 vision and to snowball on that from there. And that's the first real requirement to make the kind of comps that rely on level 2 pressure ganks, which I feel is more what G2's comp is going to rely on, just like getting some semblance of control or some semblance of action around the level 2 spikes. So in this scenario, it's a little bit nice that IG are doing this because it denies G2 some of these opportunities. And we have the start that we mentioned here where Jankos is actually getting a leash. So this is even weirder for me, is that he's getting the leash from the lane that is going to be basically his own only priority lane. And if Akali doesn't get really far ahead, then G2 actually have a good opening in teamfights. They actually have something that they can do. And when we're talking about top lane mechanisms and top lane matchups like this, this makes mid priority even more important. And this is going to be something we talk about a little bit more in the C9 versus Fnatic series, because if you have a volatile top lane matchup and the enemy mid laner is able to control the push and the priority in mid, and you have complete control of the wards in the topside river, then your volatile top lane matchup isn't necessarily going to get off the ground. However, IG are the ones who kind of need their Akali to get ahead, and they're in a good position to make that happen. So while I was talking about all of this crap, you have Jankos going top and trying to influence the topside matchup. Again, this is not necessarily something that I think is going to do anything or give anything to him, and in fact, what we see instead is Ning reacting to this, knowing that he can full well do whatever the fuck he wants on the bottom side of the map. So we already talked a little bit about Jankos' objective and what Jankos wants to do here, and now we can talk instead about Ning's goals. So Ning starts his red buff. This is all fine for him. Honestly, Ning can start and do whatever he wants because he has priority in so many lanes except for top. I think that he's prioritizing this trade, and let's talk about the side trades and why they're happening so much in these games. So first of all, side trades are really good if you know that your composition wants to play really, really hard to a certain side of the map. Lucian Braum is almost always a sign that you're going to want to play super hard to one side of the map as a jungler. So whereas as a jungler, a lot of times you're incentivized to start on your weak side to make sure this camp doesn't get taken, if you know that you have really strong mid and you have really strong bot, then you can go ahead and force a side trade to make sure that this bottom lane matchup cannot be influenced at all by the jungler. So you know that you're going to have full control of this half of the jungle, which allows your bottom lane to play super aggressively and pick out this turret so that it falls by like 10 minutes or something along those lines, because there's absolutely no way that G2 will be able to relieve pressure. They know that if there's a chance that they could get collapsed on, that they could get dove at all, they will just immediately have to seed pressure, seed the turret, and try to hope that the jungler and the mid laner can make something happen on the other side of the map, or even initiate a swap if they get the right timings and they're able to push out and set up the waves so that they don't necessarily lose that much. We kind of went over that there. We see Ning threatening and being able to threaten the dive bot. Jankos finally makes his presence shown mid, but because of the way that Rookie was leaning, and let's just quickly go look over this. Rookie knows that his jungler is over here. He knows that he has good vision coverage on this side because, again, IG were perfectly happy to use up like all their level 1 trinkets, and those are all gone, right? G2 is still holding on to a lot of theirs until the last minute. But IG have so much more safety, and I don't necessarily disagree with G2 holding on to these because they basically know that they're fucked. They know that they're not going to necessarily get pressure. They're probably going to have to seed some waves in the early lanes way depending on Ning's actions. But Ning instead is able to make this happen. He's able to just play around and avoid Jankos completely because of the way that Jankos telegraphed his pathing. Jankos doesn't opt for the side trade, which I think in this particular scenario he's really incentivized to do, because the same thing can happen to the Shy. You know, you can starve and force off the Shy. If Shy gets to level 6 without being too punished in this matchup, then it's really bad for G2. Like, it's insanely giga bad for G2. So I think that the fact that Jankos did that path and tried to do that collapse is really bad. Like, he should have gone, I think, in my opinion, for the early pressure gank mid, and then tried to set up control on the top side, traded for the blue buff, and made sure that he got control of that side of the map. Instead, he's just basically allowing himself to get 3 buffed for Reasons completely unknown. I don't know if he felt like his presence needed to be around bot to prevent a dive or what, but to me it's just a really kind of weird decision that he made. Maybe they saw the first Fnatic game in the group stage and decided, oh, okay, well, IG will play to bot side and we need to save our bottom lane the way that to prevent something that happened with Fnatic, except Fnatic's operation to function around their bottom lane and make sure their bot lane gets priority is way more valuable than G2 ever protecting their bottom lane, especially if they're drafting this kind of composition and what have you. So at this point in the game, I actually basically feel like it's over. Like, the Shy is super happy. He's almost level 6. You have so much pressure and control in mid lane. All Perks can really do here is hope he doesn't get solo killed or die. And I actually think Perks plays super well. To me, that's all Gucci. So that's kind of all I wanted to talk about in this game. It's just like the general power of this early path and what's going on. So yeah, I didn't go super hard on that game. I wanted to point out where the onus for the level 2 pressure gank mid was in G2 and how they failed, and then transition into the second game to show you how IG actually correctly play to it when the onus is on them, and when they can get a lot out of having a stronger jungle matchup. I don't want to spend more time on this game because honestly, the draft here from G2 is even worse than last game. It feels to me that you're even in a more narrow situation. You basically will not be able to, there's only one real condition, which is that nothing happens mid, right? And then Aurelia is able to exert a certain amount of side pressure and you forestall any kind of snowball coming out of Jace, which I don't think G2 are really prepared to deal with the entire series because they kept allowing this Aatrox Jace matchup to go through. But here, the key thing for me, and just why I brought up this game at all, is that Ning has the onus on him now to influence the mid matchup in level 2, and he does, in general, a much better job. Jankos is doing the full clear topside because he knows his bot camps are safe, and he wants to kind of provide some sort of passive pressure for Wunder, because Wunder, like the Shy in this matchup, can basically just Q Wunder infinitely under turret, and it really sucks for him, honestly. So already at level 1, he's getting punished really hard. He's not, the Shy is able to hold the creeps to an extent just out of turret range for him. And very slowly crash and slow push the wave in, and then once the wave hits, he can deny these creeps just by being able to harass Wunder under his turret. Ning, meanwhile, going for the scuttle because Jankos honestly is a position where he can't contest anything. Like, this jungle matchup is so bad for him. Ning can basically obliterate him whenever he wants. He can take whatever crap he wants from him, and he basically has to tell Perks to sit here and take it, you know, to not do anything too crazy, which he just did, and that gives IG and Rookie exactly what they need for their composition to succeed, because Jankos and G2 drafted specifically for the type of scaling 1-3-1 setup that they love, which is that, you know, you have your Wunder and your Perks able to exert side pressure, you have Tom Kench plus some kind of utility-based clearing ADC, disengage jungler from Gragas, and then you just hold the mid while you're getting pressure on your sides. So again, like I said, your very narrow condition is getting the Aurelia super ahead. That probably most likely not going to happen at all this game. Wunder already getting punished very heavily under turret, and Jankos should be playing to bot side, should be looking to try to get something out of the pressure that his bottom lane is exerting, like maybe the Krugs or the Infernal, but he really can't. Otherwise, Wunder is just completely out of the game. So this is a bit of a desperation play. He should really expect Ning to be able to come here with a counter. Like, the Shy plays really well around this engage, obviously, because he just avoids the E entirely. But yeah, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's already over, but it's starting to feel that way already. This just kind of gives you an idea of the transfer of pressure that you're able to exert when you really set up this mid priority early. You already see IG have an insane amount of good ward placement on the bottom. They're forcing G2 to match them mid on priority, so that gives IG a certain amount of a relief of pressure on the bottom side. It gives top an immediate ability to react, knowing that they're going to pull Jankos and they're going to pull a ridiculous amount of pressure to the mid lane, and it's just kind of across all 3 lanes you are seeing the effect of just this kind of support to mid play and how it's impacting the game. Then you're now in a position where when G2 finally do try to do something on the bottom side of the map where they're strong, it's not really going to go well for them. So you have Jankos recalling in this brush there in case of a defensive gank where he wants to counter gank or he's just looking for an opportunity. Ning, because of just like kind of look at the wards in this river here, it's very, very safe, very, very clear. The fact that they've been able to get so much priority, like in particular these pinks around mid, are something that IG, I feel, do really, really well. It's just constantly making sure they have vision in this place. Like Fnatic do this as well, and making sure that they're able to kind of obscure their mid lane roams. So if their mid lane wants to move somewhere, either to either side, because they have pinks in these immediate brushes surrounding the mid lane, then the bot lane or the top lane, depending on which side the mid laner is leaning to, have to always respect that. Very clearly in the series, you know, G2 is not doing that. So for me, this is a really big point and another really big aspect that IG are just playing off of again, that small early advantage from the level 2 gank. And obviously in Game 3, you have a really good adaptation coming out of G2, where they're the ones looking for the level 2 mid pressure finally. They're the ones who are suddenly roaming up to top lane. They get the double kill off of that super early on, and they have a good early sort of initiation for that. So I do think G2 kind of figured out the issue, but they figured it out way too late. And the impact that IG were able to have on the map in those first 2 games, just based off of the fact that they were kind of blindly looking for a strong mid pick or a strong mid jungle 2v2, is something that G2 were really late to pick up on, and it was also something that I felt like Fnatic played to really well. So we'll see an interesting back and forth going into the final, and now we're going to talk about how Fnatic used it. I really don't want to regurgitate content too much, so I'm not going to go into super duper detail on the Fnatic Cloud9 stuff, because I think we covered this in a little bit more depth on Narrative Leak, which will also be out today. I don't know if it'll be out before or after this video comes out, but you can tune into that to hear a discussion with me and LS, kind of how we feel that the Echo pick is crap, in particular the context of the C9 composition overall, and how Fnatic sort of play around it. But I do want to touch on a couple of specifics in terms of how Fnatic are using the support and how the mid pressure works in relation to the top lane matchup. So first of all, you know, this looks good, right? C9 invading the red buff, really denying Fnatic a good start for Broxa. They won't necessarily be able to influence anything that's happening on the top side of the map very well, and they'll have to trade for red buff. I don't think it's good, honestly. I just don't. Like, let's get into exactly why I don't think this is that good. So first of all, initially, it looks like it's fine for Licorice, because this is kind of a matchup where Licorice can maybe get a little bit of extra power out of the Echo, but he's already going to be clearing the wave. He's already going to be looking for push, and this incentivizes Broxa to make something happen and to influence either mid or top way earlier, and it forces Svenskeren into a position where he basically has to, his path is going to be very telegraphed, because you're going to be going directly from that red buff into trying to punish Broxa more, or going for Echo. So you know that you can't necessarily really get a 3-buff scenario. Broxa is going to be able to trade if he wants to, because you absolutely have to be up on this top side for this matchup right here. So the reason why this matchup right here is so important is because, you know, in part because of the terrain, it's really difficult to dive against Bwipo, and it's really difficult to make that happen. So C9's best option is basically to do a lane ink to the side of the map. This is a really good ward, because they know that Svenskeren's best option is to go from here. He probably has to go all the way back up here and go lane gank through this. So this is also why I think C9's ward is pretty good, like this one right here, because you have vision, you know if Bwipo is going to be able to also ward that and go against this lane gank. I don't agree with him pushing this wave aggressively here, because I think that your ideal scenario is to kind of let this wave build a bit so that Svenskeren has the option still to make this gank happen or to make this play happen before Bwipo is able to just kind of casually farm under his turret. Because you don't necessarily want to dive him around level 3 or anything like this. You don't want to deal with him being able to drop his gravity field or anything. But more importantly, you are playing so hard to this matchup and wanting something to get something out of this, because the Echo pick is not a pick that's going to just passively beat the Victor. He's going to be very feast or famine. Either he'll snowball against the Victor or nothing will happen. So he absolutely needs jungle pressure. But at the same time, this mid matchup is extremely volatile, because if Lissandra gets the first kill, C9 wins the game. Effectively, you get more, you can control this entire side of the map going on right here, and with Lissandra's pressure. But instead, you know, Svenskeren feels the need to make something happen on this top side of the map really early on, because otherwise Bwipo will just get control of the wave, allow it to bounce into him, and then just be able to farm safely under turret. But he really should be going down here and influencing this Lissandra LeBlanc matchup, because instead he's going up top. There's a very easy window for Broxah. And yes, Broxah got some of his power delayed. He no longer has a red buff, so he can't be as effective in the level 2 gank. And we talked a little bit about this in the first IGG2 game. But at the same time, because you're going to telegraph your exact location, you're not going to necessarily be keeping up and farm. That difference isn't going to be that huge, and Broxah will still have priority to make something happen around mid instead. So yeah, and this is exactly what we just talked about. Svenskeren basically wasted his time topside. He ended up getting this scuttle, which is going to basically do 0 for you, because you've already forced rocks out of the top side of his jungle. You know, he's not going to necessarily do anything down there. He's more incentivized to play to the bottom side anyway, and to look for at least the blue buff, because he's not going to have as much power, and he just is able to freely go ahead and kill Jensen. And now Caps is ahead in this lane. They're going to be able to exert a fair amount of good passive pressure, and this is really good for Fnatic. So now let's kind of see for what purpose Broxah is doing these kinds of mid ganks. So first of all, what we're noticing here is the top laners are resetting. We're aware that the next scuttle that spawns is going to be a topside scuttle, and he goes mid here. He already has vision in place also, but by doing this, by going mid, and Bwipo here is triggering his teleports to get back to the lane so that he gets the push advantage, that way they're able to try to kind of transition some of their power and some of their control into topside control in time for that scuttle to spawn. Jensen is being forced almost entirely off of his wave right now and off of turret. And now, because of some of the vision and some of the control that Fnatic have, Jensen just leaning here sort of shuts down any type of play top. But Licorice is doing it anyway. Svenskeren and Licorice are actually in a position where they are so desperate to make something happen in this Victor, because it will be so bad for them, and that's why they get extremely overeager here. I don't like the play. A lot of people have commented on why they don't like the play, so I'm not going to go super hard on it. I just wanted to really point out like the importance of where Broxah was ganking, what he was setting up for, and now this scuttle is like absolutely free if he wants it. So just what he's ganking mid for, even if he's not getting turrets, if he's just chunking and forcing the enemy mid lane off, it makes controlling the other side and the rest of the map so much more easy and so much better to execute. Before moving on, the last thing I want to talk about is really how Fnatic get a lot of use out of their support in order to control the mid lane. So obviously we're being interrupted by a replay, but what I really wanted to point out in the last clip there is just the position of the wave, the fact that C9 are effectively getting back priority here, and they're going to be ahead in the play theoretically. And normally what supports will do is, what they'll do is, for example, let's say we're Zeyzal here. If he's going to be backing in this position, say he's going to be backing in this brush, and then he's going to pick up some wards or what have you, he's going to go down here with his jungler, usually in tandem with his jungler, get some vision in river, get some vision defensively or offensively, depending on the game state, since this mid lane matchup is so volatile, and it already kind of feels a bit over, but Jensen is doing not bad, all things considered. You probably would want to get some vision around mid, so this is the general theory here, but you're definitely typically going through Fog of War. So let's see a little bit of the adaptation that Fnatic make, because they're backing second, and because they won't necessarily be able to match the rotations Zeyzal makes if they follow the same sort of pattern of going through jungle and placing vision. Okay, we're back. And what I just wanted to point out here is Hylissang absolutely is foregoing going through jungle. Zeyzal is going through jungle, as I pointed out, and as I said that he's probably wanting to do, but Hylissang just moves directly mid. And the impact of that is pretty obvious and pretty apparent. And this is something that Fnatic will do often, sometimes blind, without vision. And so what they're foregoing when Hylissang makes a path like this is they're foregoing an opportunity to get vision in river, to get vision kind of around the play that they want to make, which is usually the thing that you kind of want to move for, and he's just immediately going into it. That means that you don't really know if the support is able to match you yet or not. You're just kind of relying on the idea that the support is probably going through jungle and placing vision and doing normal things supports do before going mid to match any kind of play. Which is why Fnatic are so often able to get away with some of these, my support is behind in priority and he's just going to run straight mid so that he's there first, regardless of the fact that we don't have priority bot. We can make something happen. And that's why I think in the first Fnatic IG game, Fnatic got a little bit punished for that kind of behavior because Baolan was predicting it and just matching it as well. I don't necessarily think Baolan always is critical or thinks well about when he shouldn't match support, but there he got punished for it a little bit. I think that it's a bit of a coin toss when Fnatic do this, but when you're prioritizing picks like LeBlanc and Lee Sin, to an extent Xin Zhao, if Fnatic are able to really get a strong core 2v2 jungle mid, then it doesn't necessarily matter if Hylissang is just going to, in a matchup behind, rush directly mid. So obviously the title Better Jungler wins is it's a bit of a meme, because I think what I'm really highlighting and what I'm really getting to is the importance of really understanding your mid-jungle 2v2 matchup and why some of these LeBlanc blinds are being so valuable, because there's so much you can get out of a LeBlanc pick, right? There's very little that can actually function well into it. You can pick the Lissandra, you can pick the Galio to an extent, but you're still going to have a lot of options to get early priority in some of these matchups for the LeBlanc, especially if you have something like a Xin Zhao. And if you have such a strong 2v2 like LeBlanc Xin Zhao, like LeBlanc Talia, LeBlanc Lee Sin, then you're almost guaranteed the first scuttle spawns. So that's why a lot of these picks end up getting played. That's why you see the junglers going mid, and even if they don't get a kill, they're very happy because suddenly they have onus to get the scuttle. Suddenly they have onus to go top or bottom, and any type of reaction play, because of the distance between mid and the sidelines is so small, is going to be easily countered, and you could theoretically come and counter it with your jungle and your mid laner in that scenario. So that's why we see IG and Fnatic in these series both adapting to first pick LeBlanc against G2 and Cloud9. So I think that going into the grand final and some kind of either ban against LeBlanc or some kind of adaptation against these LeBlanc picks is ideal. I also touched very briefly in the end on the support choice and the way that Fnatic use their support. So just to go over this again without the example for a little more clarity, if Fnatic's bottom lane is behind in priority, they will back second after the enemy bottom lane to get their new item, to get their new wards, what have you, and then they will go first mid. They will just rush straight down the mid lane, or at least the support will. So if the enemy team is not prepared for this, then Fnatic can get kind of a lot of cheese picks off of that. But if Fnatic do that and they choose to forego laying down vision, or they choose to forego clearing the area with their jungler first, then they can easily get punished or countered for that, because obviously the enemy support can anticipate it and also just go directly mid, right? So I think that that's something that Fnatic kind of have to worry for, and that's why they're way less vulnerable if they can get a strong bottom lane matchup. So I think that that ends up being extremely important in the final as well, getting a very strong bottom lane matchup for you so that you don't necessarily have to take these kinds of risks to get mid priority. just the mechanisms that Fnatic have been having in place in order to emphasize mid priority, even if Caps isn't necessarily winning all of his matchups, are really good, and what they can use out of it and how Caps is using fake pressure, I think is very smart. In terms of what IG are doing well, I wanted to highlight Ning because, in particular, his adaptation from going for, okay, I'm in a weak jungle matchup and I should play to the opposite side of the enemy jungle and use the ability to split the map with pressure from my lanes and just control passively, not necessarily dive, but force the enemy bot lane off so my bot lane can chunk or anything like that, was very good. And then he was still able to play the really highly reliant 2v2 setup and adapt his priority and his his play in that regard. So I do think jungle is going to have a massive impact in this series. Both teams really come in having an understanding for the importance of these kinds of pressure gains in the mid lane and the amount of map control it gives you. I think that Fnatic overall have way more mechanisms, kind of cheeses in place to do that. So even though I expect IG to have a lot of success just in the mid lane 1v1, I think that Fnatic can still get a lot of control around their mid lane and be able to play from that and punish maybe any sorts of laid backs or resets that IG might have. As a final shout out, I think something that is really key to point out as well is that both IG and Fnatic had top lane selections in mind that scale without jungle attention, that eventually are going to overcome the enemy top laner if they don't have jungle attention. And if they can use the mid jungle mechanism as to deny the enemy jungler from giving their top lane attention, if the top lane matchup is more volatile in the early game, then that's very effective. So I expect top lane to almost be a wash, whereas red side will get the top lane counterpick and be able to place a safe scaling setup or something along those lines. And then more attention will be on the mid jungle 2v2 and then allowing or denying Fnatic control from the bottom side to influence mid. So finals should be really fun. I'm really looking forward to it because I think we won't get any kind of scenario like some of the stuff we had in semifinals, some of the stuff we had in quarterfinals where any team comes in not understanding what the meta is. Fnatic and IG both seem to have very similar reads on it with some nuances, so I think it should be really hype and exciting, and I'm looking forward to it a lot. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you've enjoyed the tournament, and I've had a great amount of time doing some YouTube content for you. Hopefully I'll do some breakdowns after the games, and I'll see you around.